welcome to That's Good Craic.
With me, Dan, Colin.
How is? What's the crack?
And Mick.
Yo, yo, yo.
Listen to our podcast every 2 weeks.
How are you doing, everybody? You're very welcome to podcast number 22 of That's Good Craic. I'm joined, as usual, by my very good friends, Colin and Danny. How are we doing, boys?
How are you?
What's the story?
Nice one, boys. This evening we have a guest that we're very excited to talk to. His name is Gavan Hennigan. Gavan is a Galway native, and from the age of 16, he abused alcohol and drugs and found himself in rehab at 21. And after getting clean and sober, he fell in love with the outdoors and surfing and diving. And then he became a saturation diver, which brought him all over the world for 10 years repairing oil rigs. And several years ago, he started taking part in extreme endurance events and is probably best known for his record-breaking 3,000-mile solo row across the Atlantic in 2017. And all this was done while raising lots of cash for charity. So this evening, it's a great honour and a privilege to welcome Gavan to That's Good Craic. So, Gavan, what's the crack?
Cheers, Mick. Thanks for the pretty nice intro.
It was a pretty impressive intro, actually. Let's be honest.
Cool, that was.
Do you like that one, yeah?
Yeah, sitting here kind of worrying about life, and then you hear he rode 3,000 miles. He ain't got no problems.
That's it.
He's done his homework.
Yeah, no,
He has,
no, you know, I followed you while you were doing a Gav. You know what I mean? I did do a bit of prep, obviously, in the lead up to this, and to be honest with you, it was cool. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like really enjoyed looking up your achievements and stuff. You know, but the reason we kind of had you on, it's funny when you say that. Like, we had a podcast, you know, early on in this, and it was like it came up as I think it was like chasing the buzz after the buzz, and it was like you know. We all, like, you know, just after you kind of, you know, come out of where we did with, like, you know, substance abuse, and you can kind of go looking for buzzes in other areas, and after it, like, your name just came up, you know what I mean? I don't know what, you know, and you know, we kind of reached out to see if you'd come on, and it's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like, you know, doing a 5K and then saying, like, you know, we'll have Usain Bolt on, you know, like, you know, it's like that's the way it kind of feels, kind of putting our stuff up against yours. But that's what we aim to do. We aim to kind of, you know, show links between people, like, you mean, and I'm sure we'll get inspiration from your achievements and stuff. But
yeah, it's like you were saying there about the buzz, like chasing the buzz, you know, and like I get asked that a lot. Like, I mean, after the row and all that, like, I've done a lot of like podcasts and, you know, sort of media and stuff like that, and like one kind of like typical media question is like, oh, have you replaced like your addiction with, you know, the addiction to the outdoors, or like are you still sort of chasing something? And like, I, you know, at first I kind of answered it nicely, and then I just started getting annoyed with the same question, you know, because like, you know, you're trying to compare, you know, something super destructive, you know what I mean, that destroys lives with, you know, a sort of an adventure sport or something that you're in love with, you know, and you're trying to tell people that, like, you know, I'm going out there, you know, to do all this stuff, like going out in the Atlantic because I love it, you know, like, and it, you know, and then I get to share the story with, you know, school kids and stuff, and like, you know, I say, you tell me how that's a negative thing, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing really positive about addiction. Like, it just, you know, it ruins lives, you know what I mean? So you can't compare the two, you know, but there is another side to that as well, is that, like, you know, you need to pick your battles. Like, and like I didn't start doing any of this stuff until, you know, it was a while after I got clean. So, you know, it wasn't like I just put down the drinking drugs one day and then all of a sudden I'm, you know, going out like doing all this mad stuff, you know what I mean? You know, it was a few years later, you know, when I kind of had my feet on the ground and sort of had a, you know, clean and sober life.
Brilliant.
It's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's like, you know, people always assume you're replaced, but fuck, like, when I think about it, I did replace drinking and drugs with lots of stuff, you know. And I did, and I really, and you know what? When I kind of started to experience new things, they gave me feelings that drinking drugs never did.
Yeah.
You know, it was like this, like just experiencing, like even on a smaller scale, like after I do 10 kilometers, the last kilometer I will run myself into the ground. And that feeling when I stop is one of the most beautiful feelings physically that I've ever felt in my whole entire life.
Yeah.
Like, you know. So it's all these different things, and us three are big into sports as well, like a lot of combat sports and running and so on, and it is something I did replace it. I replaced my addiction with creativity and passion. I had a passion for drugs, man. I wanted to know everything about them. You know what I mean? Every single thing. You know what the doctor was prescribing. I remember coming across a book out of fucking doctors before and wanting to know every single thing in it. You know. And, but then I replaced that and gave that same enthusiasm I had for using into life, like into everything.
Yeah.
And trying lots of things. Like Mick always says, we never said no to anything. You know, if it didn't work out, then we just didn't do it again. But if it did, happy days, you know, and that's kind of the philosophy that we've always had, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like just trying to channel it into something, as I said, creativity or something positive. And yeah, for me, it's just been the outdoors, like, because it's just what I get a kick from, and just looking for, I suppose, inspiration in different events and just travel and stuff. And it's just been like constantly for me, a theme for me while I've been clean, you know, all these years.
Deadly.
Big thing, firstly, the achievement that you did, like rolling across the Atlantic, unbelievable stuff, you know. And I suppose for me, for many years, when I gave up drinking drugs, the hardest thing for me was being on my own, you know, in silence or just in solitary, like. And the thing that stood out for me was, you know, I was listening to one of your talks, and you had basically said, you know, what's the longest you've been on your own? And that, like, when you were doing the road, did you ever, obviously you had to take breaks, or did you get much sleep in there? And how much time did you kind of spend in complete silence? And kind of what sort of mad thoughts were you thinking during that time?
It's funny, I'm just doing an application for a race next year in Kyrgyzstan. It's called the Silk Road Mountain Race, and it's a unsupported bike packing mountain bike race through the Tian Shan Mountains. And one of the questions is if you could be about 2 weeks kind of, you know, going, you know, through the mountains, whatever. And one of the questions is like, what's the longest you've ever been alone?
And I'm 49 days.
I'm going like, I bet my left bollock that like no one is going to have spent 50 days on their own, like without seeing another human being. Because it's just like, even when I think back now, it's like it's absolutely ridiculous, you know, that for someone to be on their own for that amount of time, it's just not possible nowadays, you know what I mean? So like before I went out there, like I was super like daunted by that, you know. That was what I was more afraid of than anything, was just that emptiness, like, because for me, like rolling across the Atlantic, like people say to me, oh, well, you know, like you're such an adrenaline junkie and all that, like, and I say to them, like, you realize rolling across the Atlantic is quite possibly the most boring thing you can imagine doing. It's just the same shit day in, day out. And it was that sort of monotony and that sort of emptiness that was like something that really appealed to me, you know. And going out there and spending that amount of time like on your own it's life changing, really, you know. And I think when you're in the outdoors, if you're with somebody else, like, and you're in their company, like you're kind of their energy, you're forced to kind of engage them a little bit. But when you're by yourself, just in nature for like a long period of time, you have nobody else to engage with, and you only have the elements to engage with, you know. So like I found myself like from, you know, the first few days where I was like, you know, kind of a little bit seasick and not really, you know, in tune with sort of myself or the boat and anything, you know, to becoming sort of like almost like the Zen state after a few weeks, you know, where it was just kind of eat, sleep, row, repeat, you know. And like I could just see, I was so in tune to the sort of the ocean and the elements. Like I could see when the wind was changing, like I could see maybe sort of like obviously like 40-50 meters off the back deck, and I could just see like little ripples appearing on the waves, and I'd be like, okay, a gust of wind is coming now, you know. And like I'd stand up and like I just move with the boat, you know, or I just take the right step at the right time, because I knew the boat was just going to go list to port or to starboard. And like it just kind of, it just became this sort of like, I suppose, like almost like a little bit kind of Zen state, where it was just non-stop, just living in that sort of environment where you just eat, sleep, row, repeat, basically. Yeah.
And has it stayed with you, Gavin? Or when you say it was life altering, like the changes that must have happened within over that time, like, you know what I mean? Have you felt? Do you feel that the effects have stayed with you, or the changes have stayed with you? Like,
Yeah, I mean, like there's positives and there's negatives. Like when you spend that amount of time on your own and you survive through it and you get through it, like you almost feel like you don't need people anymore. So like, I have to kind of push myself. Like I'm a bit of a loner in one regard. Like I'm quite happy in my own company, and rightly so. You have to be if you want to go out on a boat for 50 days on your own. And when I came ashore after that, like they did all these interviews and. Everyone was like, "Fuck, I'll never do that again." And I was like, "Yeah, I'd do that again. No bother." Because I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? So, I suppose the detrimental effect of that is that, like, I might struggle then, with human relationships, which I have done. So I have to push myself to, spend time with people, like, But like the other stuff, like, all the lessons, I suppose, that I learned out there, like a lot of that stayed in me. And I suppose for me, like, I like to be uncomfortable or to get in sort of hardship so that like it makes my life seem a bit easier, and I get that a lot, so I suppose like even just now revisiting it by talking to you lads, like I just instantly have gratitude for simple stuff, like like when I was out there for 50 days, like I couldn't actually go for a piss properly. Like the boat moved around that much that I couldn't piss over the side because I had to hold on to one of the jackstays. And like, so I basically had to get a bottle and go into the cabin and lie down and like go on my side and piss into this bottle, and like I shat into a bucket for like 50 days. And this was like this rubber bucket that like kind of collapsed the whole time so I'm like trying to like pull myself onto this bucket, like, and take a dump into it and then like chuck it over the side. You know what I mean? And so, you know what I mean? It's simple things like sitting on a nice porcelain toilet, like, you sort of forget these things and like, that's just simple stuff, like, but, there's sort of deeper lessons then would be, just around sort of, how I sort of manage myself and how, how the whole experience was. And it was just, having to sort of push myself way beyond what I thought was possible, like, through sleep deprivation and just, my body been, losing like 13 kilos in body weight and, just keep going through all that, and, having like, salt sores on my arse like this big and, sort of stuff like that, so, it's a lot of stuff went on. Yeah, it was interesting.
I just because I spent a few years at sea, like I worked at sea for a few years in the South Pacific Ocean, and I've seen how aggressive it is. Right, I've seen waves like bigger than houses, not turning. Yeah. They don't flip, but I've seen if you're down in between two waves, it's way bigger than any house. Yeah. I've seen it like in the South Pacific Ocean. So when you're talking there, I wonder, did you like map out a certain time of year where the ocean wasn't aggressive, or because I was on a ship and I was looking out the sea and I was fucking scared looking at it. Like, Yes. But I learned. Yeah. I learned to respect the ocean. I really did. Looking at it from there and just realizing how small we actually are in comparison to this, like, that we, it's really insignificant when you're at sea.
Yeah. And that's a huge part. Like when I was training, I had the boat was 20 foot long and I was training like in Galway Bay and off the coast of Ireland and stuff. And like I had a friend helping me in a yacht and stuff. And like he used to, I used to go out into the bay and I'd be only out a couple of miles and like he wouldn't be able to see me, like, the boat's that small, like, and as soon as you go out, and the road that I did was part of a race called the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge, and it's it's held every year and it's held at the most optimum time because you go in from the Canary Islands to Antigua during the when the trade winds are blowing during the sort of dry season. So there's a lot of trades blowing. So you do have a bit of kind of optimum wind, and there isn't any hurricanes in the Caribbean when you arrive, which is obviously an important point. So it's the best time to cross, and it's probably the easiest ocean crossing out of all of them. but still you're running into, you know, huge surf and like, yeah, there's waves as big as houses. There was a couple of days where it was, you know, sort of, you know, big surf.
How many meters swell are you talking about when you say big? Like, what would be the biggest
probably
you've encountered?
the biggest we had was like probably 6-7 meter swell.
Wow, that's fucking big. Like, I've been in 6 and 7 meters, and that rocks a ship to its core.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by how you actually did you turn it over or anything?
No, I didn't capsize. So that particular that hit us, that big swell hit us about 3 or 4 days in, and I had trained. See, I'm a surfer, and like I trained to actually surf the boat. So I actually kept the boat moving because it was swell coming from behind. It wasn't coming from the bow. So a lot of the other boats put out their sea anchors and sort of you know, just batten down the hatches a bit. But I managed to actually make it to the ground, and I actually got.
You surfed the 7 meter wave.
I'm doing this in style.
Just give some perspective on that. Like, a 7 meter swell, you wouldn't even see your boat in between both waves.
Exactly, it was going.
You wouldn't be. I always wondered, like, because I used to always prepare in my head because I lived at sea. So I used to prepare, like, and go, right, if Atten went down, what would I do, right? So I realized that this is going to sound so ridiculous, right? And I was in hot waters as well. So there was lots of sharks and shit around. But I always thought, right, you know what it is? I'm going to have a snorkel kit because you can snorkel for about 8 hours without getting tired. Right? But then, you know, I always thought, okay, well, I'll do this, and this, and this. But then when the storms came, you wouldn't, like, there was times when I was thrown out of my bed, like, you know, the storms were out. And this was in a huge ship, like. And, like, I realized that no matter, like, when I used to look out over the edge and seeing, you would not see someone in between those waves when the waves return. So to hear that you actually surfed through, basically surfed through a 7 meter swell is like, I don't think people can gauge. Like, I don't think it's very hard to even explain how big that is, like, in terms of physical size. It was,
like, because, you know, you're facing the other way. Like, you're looking, when you're in the rowing position, you're looking back, like, you know, so you're facing the stern. So you can see it coming at you, you know.
Wow.
So the boat is kind of like, it's got a really pointy bow, you know. And so what I had done for that, like, I actually loaded up. Say I had ballast water, so I had 60 liters of ballast water, and I loaded it all into the bow of the boat, right up into the nose. So I had I had extra weight when I dropped, like, down the face of the wave, and then I would basically take off. So it would only take me, basically, you know, I sort of get picked up and I take one stroke and I pull the oars in over the side, and then I just take off. And I had I could see my speed in knots, like, and I was hitting like 17, 18 knots going down these waves.
And I was really fast.
Down, and then I get into the trough of the wave. And then I kind of almost like stopped then at that little point, but the whole boat would be like shuddering, and there would have been like waves. The wave would have flooded the boat as well, you know. But like it would all be scuppering out, and the whole thing would be rocking back and forth. And a lot of time I was getting kind of bounced out of the rowing position, you know.
Were you afraid?
Though at that time I wasn't too bad. Like during the night, like that was the scariest. Like so, like when there was big swell at night and I couldn't see the waves. And I had a lot of stuff that was, you know, hitting me side on, and and I hit bits of debris during the nighttime, and like that scared me. Anytime I was like inside in the cabin lying down, like I hit some debris, like, and you know, I thought I'd knocked a hole in the boat, you know, so that scared the shit out of me. And yeah, it was tough. Like I went through almost like 2 moon cycles while I was out there, you know, so that was quite interesting because like it would start off, you know, absolutely pitch dark, you know, at nighttime, and then slowly it'll get a bit brighter, you know, with the moon, and then you get into a full moon and it'll be like super bright and you can see the waves then, you know. But then when it got dark, like, you know, if the skies are clear, you could see the Milky Way, you know, pretty much perfectly, like, you know, it was pretty
I've seen that, yeah, when I used to go onto the open deck and just there's no light pollution. It was the most beautiful thing. I've never seen the stars the way I've seen it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And but it's amazing how the night vision kind of kicks in. We can see very well in the dark when we're just in the dark all the time. Like it's
Yeah.
But geez, man, it's impressive. The whole thing. Just listening to you talking about it, like, it's scaring me just even thinking about it.
Yeah, like the boats are really strong. You know, like they, you know, there's the boat. Like the boats are stronger than the people. You know, like the way they're made nowadays.
Wow.
You know? So like there's a couple of boats still floating around out there. There's probably quite a few, you know, that have been abandoned. Guys who got rescued, and
I've seen it.
Boats still floating around, you know.
we went to like, well, I didn't, but when I was on ships, you'd often be called to rescue other ships. Like it's code of the ocean where they just have to go, and you would not see the yacht. You would not see it until you were right beside it.
Yeah.
No, you would not see it. So
yeah. I had there was a guy who, so I have a AIS, you know, the automatic identification software. So it's like a every boat has one nowadays. So basically it shows up on like kind of radar, you know, that another boat's nearby, and it'll give you their, you know, their call sign, and it'll tell you the name and the direction they're heading. And so if you're in a harbour, like you're going to have this alarm going off all the time because there's boats all around you, so you have to mute it. And then I had it set like that I had like a 10-meter radius on mine, so that if any big like tanker got anywhere near me, like the alarm would go off, you know. But so a smaller vessel won't show up like at that 10-meter radius. And so this is about 5 weeks in, I was in the cabin in the evening. It was just around sunset, and I was just like, I just had food and I was just brushing my teeth, and I was going to go back out and do a bit of rowing, and my proximity alarm went off for like something that's within 500 meters. And like I hadn't heard that alarm since I'd been in the harbour back in La Gomera. So I instantly was like, what the fuck is that? Like, so I open up the cabin door, and I look out, and there's a yacht like a few hundred meters off my stern. And at first, like I'd seen a couple of tankers like way in the distance over that period of time, but apart from that, I hadn't seen anything but sky and water. And I saw this yacht, and like there was a couple of seconds where I just couldn't identify what it was. It was just like this shape in the water that I hadn't seen, and it was almost like my brain couldn't compute it for a moment. And then eventually I was like, holy shit, that's a boat, like, and they're off my stern. And then they come on the radio, and they were like, this guy in the radio, and I was like, he knew my call, the name of my boat, because I came up in his AIS, and he was like, oh, are you okay? Like, how many of you are there? And I was like, there's just me. There's just one of me. And he, like, I just hear the radio stop for a minute, and he's like, yeah, come again. How many of you are there? And I'm like, there's just me. And he's like, there's just one of you. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God, are you all right? Do you need anything? I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm rowing across the Atlantic, like, and I'm doing it unsupported. So even if I did need something, I'd like to not like take something on board, because then it would be classed as supported. So they came alongside. They were only not far, and they were sailing across the Atlantic, and they were actually going to Antigua as well. So he was chatting on the radio. It's this English guy, and he was saying, we'll see you in Antigua, and I was like, well, it's going to take me another like month to get there. You'll probably be there next week, So he actually ended up coming down to the finish of the row. So when I came into the finish, and like finished in Antigua in this place called English Harbour, there was a big kind of crowd there and stuff, and it was a bit of a gathering and stuff. It was pretty cool. But anyways, afterwards it kind of died down a little bit, and he kind of popped up and was like, hey, it's me, Mike is his name, and he got chatting to him, and it was really cool. And then in just the craziness of everything, I never got his contact or anything. And then about 18 months later, he found me on Facebook, and he sent me this message, and he had just retired, and he'd been sailing all his life, but he like started with just sailing across the Atlantic. And he sent me this message, this big long message saying, I'm actually in Tahiti right now. I was really inspired by, meeting you on the Atlantic. Like, after I left you in Antigua, the guys that I had on board, like they got off in Panama, and I solo sailed, across the Pacific to Antigua. And I'm living here at the moment off my boat. I'm taking couples out on honeymoon trips around the bays, around the islands, and it was just just pretty cool to hear his side of the story.
Amazing. Gavin, just like, I know it's jumping back a bit, but I was interested there. You were saying, like, that you were a while clean and sober before you started into all this, because you've done loads, like all these extreme events, like And it was just, what was the catalyst for you to start doing all this stuff? Like, you know what I mean? How did it come about that you, because it's not like everyone's gig, you know what I mean? Like doing like 500 kilometer sleds across the Arctic or whatever, you know, it's like, what was the catalyst, do you think, for you? It's because you've done so much now over these last few years, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because I didn't like, it was that Arctic ultramarathon that I did, it was kind of the first big thing. Like I've been doing some adventure races in Ireland and, you know, a few triathlons and stuff like that, and like a little bit of mountain running, but not like anything official. Like I'd spent a lot of years, you know, surfing, snowboarding and kind of mountaineering and stuff, but that was all kind of just like, I suppose I just described that as like fun stuff, you know, like just being in the outdoors. There was no kind of competitive element to it, you know. And then it was this Arctic Ultra that kind of really piqued my interest. I just read this article. I think it was like a Red Bull article of like the 10 toughest races in the world. And this one particular race was listed. And, you know, like I'd never really done any sort of, like I'd never done a marathon, you know, and this thing was like a 500 kilometer ultramarathon. So like, I suppose in typical kind of like all or nothing addict kind of mentality, I just was like, yeah, that sounds like I want to, you know, dive in at the deep end there. And it was just a case of sending an email, and just one thing led to another. The organizer kind of got back to me, and like I had sort of cold weather experience, so that kind of, you know, played to me a bit better than say like having a lot of, you know, running experience. You know, I was able to look after myself in, you know, out there in the elements, whereas like somebody with like a whole lot of running experience like mightn't have the like wilderness survival skills, you know. So I just kind of, that race kind of really started it all, really. And then it was just from there that I started looking at other stuff. And I suppose once, you know, I like that race, or to me that sort of distance seemed really impossible in the beginning, you know. And you know, once I ticked it off and got it done, then it was like kind of gave me a bit more confidence to try something else. And like it all led to obviously the row, you know, and that was, you know, something that I thought was you know, impossible as well. And obviously until I did it, you know.
Yeah, because like I suppose in 2011 my father passed away, and you know, it was a turning point in my life. Like I just started to actually realize about mortality myself, and I suppose how much I've been controlled by fear through my life, and not like, you know, setting out and actually doing things that I wanted to do, you know. And it was so held back. And it was actually a conversation I had with him before he passed away. And he just shared about some of his life regrets, and he asked me some questions about what I hadn't done in my life and things like that. And he just said to me at the end of it, he says, Mick, he says, it's over in the blink of an eye. And he clicked his fingers. And after he passed away, I used to dream about that, man. I used to dream about that moment. So, you know, then it was just all these things that, like, I ended up going back to college for music, start taking up, you know, martial art, doing all these different things that, you know, I'd just been held back from doing for whatever reason, you know. Yeah. But what I have found, I suppose, in our original podcast, our thing was like that we kind of we've noticed that people with, like, say, substance abuse issues, many of them have, like, you know, obsessive minds. Like ours can be very obsessive, but we can kind of channel that into positive things, you know what I mean? Yeah. So doing all this stuff. But what we have found, and I suppose I can speak for myself anyway, is that sometimes, like, I can push it too far, you know. And that's what I'm just interested about with you. Like, do you find that, like, because you're so driven, like, you know what I mean, that like when you're doing something physically, say for instance, and you're doing it in extreme environments, do you ever find, like, where do you find that line, or do you just go, you know what I mean? And maybe you haven't found the line. Have you ever found it that, like, you know what I mean, you push it too far, for instance? Or it's it's a really good sort of question, and like it's a really important part of like why I do all that stuff, you know. And I suppose, like, these endurance events are, you know, like, I suppose I know you probably heard the terminology, like, you know, feeding the black dog, feeding the white dog, you know. Like for me, you know, a lot of these endurance events are about feeding the black dog. And what I mean by that, like, is that, like, it's really about getting in touch with my darker side, you know. And I think, you know, that's a kind of area a lot of people don't talk about. You know, I suppose in life is that, like, there is a darker side to everybody, like, you know, and there's that sort of primal sort of dark, you know, sort of, and for us as addicts, like, you know, whether you like to admit it or not, like, there's that part of you that's like a self-destructive and sort of a masochist, and, like, do you know what I mean, wants to just, you know, kind of implode a little bit, you know. And I found that, like,
doing some of these endurance events that like it's almost like a kind of controlled way of like tapping into that a bit, you know. And like I have to go like to get a lot of these things done, you know, like to finish them or to, you know, sort of get over the line. Like I really have to kind of go into that pitch, you know, where I wouldn't be able to go into that on a day-to-day basis. Like I wouldn't be able to go into that in my normal life at all, you know, because it just brings out that part of me, you know. And I think you have to be like that. Like, you know, for me sitting here now, you know, like I've just had dinner and like I'm chilling out and, you know, life's easy. Like for me to sort of envision like where I was on the Atlantic, like, you know, a month in, you know, like that's almost like, yeah, it's just another world. And I was another person then, you know what I mean? And I suppose that's kind of what it's like when I'm in it, when I'm doing it. And yeah, like it is, yeah, like that's why I wouldn't like advise it for everyone. Like, I mean, because like, you know, for example, I was in Japan there last month. I did this thing called Japanese Odyssey. It was 2,200 kilometer bike race, and it was like I did it in 10 days, and I did it with a mate. You know, we both kind of rode together, and it was really tough. Like we had to ride over 200 kilometers a day. We slept like probably on average 2-3 hours a night. But like there was really big climbs, like these really long, hard climbs on the bike. And, you know, I was like cycling along one day and like I was just trying to get through this climb, and like into my head, just this voice of basically just as I was climbing, just was saying, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. And that was like the only way I could like get through the climb, was just like to basically repeat that over and over to myself. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's like an actual good advertisement.
You should take up counselling. Yeah,
exactly. Like, you know, you'd want to, you know, I'm not exactly, you know, want to lock me up or something when I hear you saying that. But like, you know, I mean, I suppose I know myself well enough at this stage. Like, I know that like I do have a really good survival instinct, and that I not like that's just a part of me. It's not a huge part of me. Like, but I'm very much aware of it. Like, you know, like that like I didn't mean it in the sense that like, you know, actually kill yourself, but it was like I had to like push myself that hard. Like that was the thought to get myself, you know, up that climb, was just kill yourself. You like, you know what I mean? So yeah. It's a little bit extreme, but like that's, I suppose, just in a nutshell, like, yeah. And like, you know, you can push yourself. Like I've injured myself. Like when I rode the Atlantic, like I got a stress fracture in my back, you know, like I broke my back rowing the Atlantic, you know.
Wow.
You know, so that's, you know, that's the reality. Like, and you know, I was out for a few months after that, and I've gotten, you know, other injuries and stuff as well, you know, from a lot of you know, repetitive strain stuff, you know, like so that's the reality of it, you know. So yeah, on one hand, like, yeah, you know, it's good to go out and enjoy the outdoors and all that, but I mean, I think, you know, sometimes you do have to be careful, like with your mentality and how you approach it, you know.
I mean, it's like the distances you're talking about are mad. Like I've ran a marathon. That's the longest I've ran, and even when I was training for that here in the heat, I always found like the last 5-6 kilometers of the longer runs, my mind will go into some fucked up places. Like seriously, like, no man, that's not the distance you're talking about. That's a small distance in comparison. And I'd be like, that kind of thoughts, like you'd be in some of the darkest, weirdest places, like especially like I used to get up here in the morning at 5 a.m. because I live in the Canary Islands. I live in Tenerife, and when I was training for the marathon, was like coming up to October for Dublin City Marathon, and you were getting up I was trying to get up at 5 a.m. because it was so hot here at the time. It was like September, and it was, you know, and I was thinking, if I ran in the heat, it just fade, like. But at the end of the runs, like I was literally thinking mental shit, like, you know what I mean? Like just weird. And then I'm looking at the distances you're talking about. I'm like, I don't know what sort of crazy shit be going on inside my head, you know? It's mad, like.
Yeah, well, it's just when you add in the sleep deprivation, things start to get a bit crazy, you know. So I suppose, I mean, like I've always said, like it's, you know, it's better than any acid trip, like, you know, when you start to go a couple of days without sleep, you know, you start to.
Do you think the saturation diving kind of helped with the isolation part? Because that like how long were you in the kind of in a bell, down below.
Yeah.
Like for extended periods of time. How long were you in the tubes, like, before you come up again? Like,
we do 28 days at a time.
28 days, yeah.
So underneath.
So you're underneath the water for 28 days?
Yeah.
No, we're sort of, so it's kind of, we're in a chamber inside a boat, so we're under pressure.
The pressure is
living environment, and then we go from that chamber into this other chamber, which takes us down to the bottom. It's called a diving bell, and then we get out of that and go to work. So that's like our habitat. So we do like 6 hours in the water, and then we come back. So we come up and down every day, like, and we we sleep and eat in the chamber, and then at the end of the sort of it'll be about 3 weeks, we'll do decompression. So which is like the pressure slowly bleeds out of the chamber over the space of like a week, and you slowly come back to atmospheric pressure. So yeah, like, so the thing is, with regards to like a lot of this mentality stuff, comparing that to like sort of like, say, the row, for example, like once you go into the chamber, you're committed. Like it takes you like a few hours to compress into to the depth, and then to get back out, like I said there, it takes a week. So like you learn about the word commitment, there's no getting out, So that was similar to me with the row. It was like a case of like, once I push off from La Gomera, like that's it, like, unless something catastrophic goes wrong and I need to get like, some sort of rescue needs to be instigated, like I'm committed to, row into the other side. Like, so yeah, like, just living, like, I could do that. I can be doing my job like, 3 or 4 months of the year where I'm in that environment. So yeah, it's pretty unique. It's pretty bizarre job.
Do you still do it?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So
just because I'm just sitting here listening, and I'm racking my brain. Did I read somewhere that is the most dangerous job in the world, or one of them?
Yeah, it definitely is. Probably,
is it the same thing as when guys are putting the cables underneath the ocean? Is it the same? Is that? That's the same job, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're working with. Like the pipes and cables and stuff, in the bottom of the rigs, and it's just because like you're pretty far from help. Like if something happens, if you get injured, like you can't just get out of the chamber. Like you have to decompress. There's no way around it. Like we're all paramedically trained anyway, but like you can get a doctor in if it was bad. Like, but you can't just get out and go to hospital. So, like, there's this saying like that it takes less time to come back from the moon that does come back from those depths. Which is the reality.
No half measures. No half measures at all, huh?
Definitely not.
What depths you going down to, like?
The deepest I've been is 210 meters.
Wow.
So that took 8 days to come back from. 8 days. Yeah.
And what in the actual the tank or the tanks or the compression chambers on the boat? What bar are you at? And that, just out of interest, just something. So
like 210 is 22 bar. So
22 bar, and you have to stick at that when you're in the chamber, then to keep you.
Okay. Which is like, so when you first go in, it's not nice. Like your initial compression is hard. Like it takes you a few days to acclimatize, and then once you're acclimatized, it's fine, and then you're at your working depth for a few weeks, and then when you come back out, then it's obviously 8 days is a long time on top of being in there already for like 20 days, and then you get out, and then you're kind of a bit all over the place for about 10 days, and then you're back to normal.
And do you notice your voice change when you're? You're all going to like weird voices.
Completely helium voice. Yeah. Like you wouldn't like most people wouldn't be. You know because the mixture. So right now, like we're breathing, 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen. So we breathe heliox. So they take out the nitrogen, because nitrogen at depth is narcotic, and then they replace it with helium, which is another inert gas. So, but the mixture completely changes. So when we're diving at 200 meters, I think the mixture is 98.5% helium, 1.5% oxygen.
Wow.
So you're at because if you breathe 21% oxygen at depth, like that oxygen, more of it gets pushed into your tissues. So like it becomes, it becomes toxic. So you have to breathe a different mixture. So it's a heliox atmosphere, So I usually tell people, I'm like, so we're in this chamber and we're in like we're in a different atmosphere. And like I asked people like, do you understand what that means? Like, have you ever been in a different atmosphere? And they're like, well, no, because I'm from Earth. Like, Earth's atmosphere.
Are you sure? Are you sure you're from Earth? More I've listened,
maybe not you.
More I've listened to this. This fucking man is super fucking man. Ireland's answer to it. It's insane. I'm blown away, and I'm not even saying that just to be nice. Like, I'm literally sitting here fucking astounded by what's going on.
We got Gavan on to kind of inspire us and to inspire our listeners, and everyone's kind of going, I'm not nothing. Just fucking, you know what I mean? I'm going to eat ice cream on the couch. What's the point? But no, like you can't, like, you know, in fairness, it's like, you know, you could look, well, as you wouldn't look at it that way. It is like all the stuff you've talked about, Gavan, in our own little way, like, you know what I mean? Even I took up running there a while ago. Like I was just had an aversion to running, and I decided I was going to do this hell and back. I know it's pretty impressive. But I said, right, I'm gonna have to prepare, and Colin was giving me some insights into it, like, you know what I mean, he was saying about the mental side of it, like that when you start off and your mind's gonna be telling you to stop. I was thinking to myself, like, you know what I mean, like, you know, after a couple of K maybe that'll kick in. 200 yards, I wouldn't even say that far into the run. I was going, oh my, wait a minute, my knee's going to go there. You know what I mean? I was like, you may stop, man, go back. And I just thought of it and pushed through, like, you know what I mean? And ended up, like, you know what I mean, being able to do it, you know what I mean? But in our own small little ways, like, you know what I mean? It is such a mental thing, you know what I mean? The way you can bring in that positive mental stuff, you know what I mean? It's amazing what you can actually achieve.
Yeah. So, like, when you were going through that, like, that was kind of, you know, your body was kind of gone into shock, like, that first little bit.
Absolutely.
So, like, that's the same thing. Yeah, it's like it goes into shock, and then, you know, because it's like I always see the body as like this kind of like just obviously this bag of meat and bones. It's like, you know, always kind of looking for the easy way out, you know, and like it's just about kind of like forcing it to do stuff, and like it will adapt, and it'll kind of, you know, like it is a machine, you know what I mean? And like I've always found that, you know, like I'm super aware, like when I did the row and like any of the ultras and any stuff like that, it's like you just got to get through that adaptation phase, you know, like, and then once you're through that, like your body just kind of it just wants to keep going, and it just knows that one thing, you know, and like that's a really important thing for me. Like when I'm doing stuff is like that I need to get through that adaptation phase where whatever it is, like if it's going to be, you know, something short and intense like hell and back, like it's going to, you know, happen quicker, but something long and, you know, going on for like, you know, days or weeks or whatever, it's going to take longer, you know. So that's what happened to me in the row. Like I kind of, you know, I was really, like I was talking about earlier, I was all over the place in the beginning, and, you know, eventually like I got used to the sleep deprivation, and I, you know, got used to the food that I was eating and the amount that I was rowing, and like I just turned into this like machine, and I almost had it in my head, like even though like I was completely deteriorating, like I actually felt like I was getting stronger, you know, because I was becoming more efficient, like at like, you know, rowing those miles on like less calories or, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, like I always had this thing that like, yeah, that it is like a machine, that it just needs to, you know, be kind of forced into doing something, and it will just keep going. Like as long as it's given, you know, some amount of calories and a bit of sleep, it'll just push on, you know.
Cool. I just sitting here thinking, I just wanted to ask you one question. I'm going to rewind all the way back to when you were using drugs and so on. Like, was it difficult for you to give up drugs, or did you just make your mind up one day or drinking whatever it was that I'm not quite sure what it is you've done like in that area, but did it take you a few times? Was it difficult, or was it just I made up my mind and that's it, I'm done?
Yeah, like I relapsed a little bit after rehab, maybe twice, but like I think initially, like once I'd discovered that there was a life after it, I kind of made that decision a bit. Yeah, like so I said I did, but for me, like I knew I was, like from day one, I knew I was alcoholic. Like
I could imagine. Yeah. So if you applied
like
madness,
my dad was in AA, like, and he was, you know, alcoholic and all that as well. So I kind of like had a lot of that in, like I knew from when I was younger and stuff, you know, about that, and like yeah, kind of, as I said, knew from day one, you know, and then once I, you know, heard the word powerless, like it just kind of the penny dropped really, you know. So yeah, I, you know, sort of I suppose there was definitely a decision made, like, you know.
Because it is what you said there. It is discovering there is a life after it. Because that's what it is. You have to discover it. Because I remember thinking, what the fuck am I going to do when I stop doing this? Like, when I stop drinking, what am I actually going to do? And I did. And that's what it was. It was a discovery that, Jesus, actually, there's, you know, it's actually, you know, they talk in life beyond your wildest dreams and all this stuff. And like, I did discover that. You know, and it was a discovery. I've heard it being said before, but I just thought when you said it there about discovering it, because that's what we have to do. We have to actually discover the fucking thing, don't we?
Yeah. So for me, like I had a really shaky time after rehab. Like I said there, I relapsed a couple of times, and like I really kind of went through the ringer for it was, you know, 18 months, 2 years, and like I actually one of my relapses was a kind of botched suicide attempt where I took a load of sleeping tablets, painkillers, and whatever else I could find. It ended up in the psychiatric unit in Galway, and you know, sort of like that was probably my low point, and you know, kind of got back from that, and you know, got back and I managed to stay clean and sober, and like it wasn't until a few years later that I kind of realized. You know, like the penny drop, or sort of like the hindsight, I suppose. Like, you know, when you're using drugs and stuff, like you can have all these like explanations about like, and all these, you know, of how your drug using was or how your life was then. But like at the time, there's very little input like in your mind. It's just kind of like you're at the coalface, you know, you're using, you know. And I was just kind of like super frustrated, and I almost thought that I hated life. Like I always had it in my mind that was the problem, and it wasn't until I suppose years later that I realized that it wasn't that I hated life. It was that I actually loved life, and I actually wanted to do all this stuff, like, but I actually couldn't do it because I was crippled from the drinking drugs, you know. So there was that part of me, like, that I was, you know, that loved life, like that wanted to live was there. And it wasn't that I hated life. It was that I was just so crippled and so frustrated and so beat down from, you know, low self-esteem and using alcohol and drugs that I just wanted to end it all. You know what I mean? And you know, touch wood that like I had discovered all that stuff, like, you know, by staying clean and sober, and that was the bottom line, that like I, you know, give myself half a chance, and then once that's in place, I was able to discover, you know, the outdoors and sort of like, you know, go down that path to, you know, where I am now.
Yeah, I think it's important, like, it seems especially nowadays, it's great to see, like, for you to be there at 21, giving up drinking drugs, or, you know, going into rehab and all that type of stuff, and where you've ended up now. And I think, Danny, you got clean at 21, did you as well?
Yeah, I got clean when I was 20.
20, yeah.
Funny enough, I did a lot of my using in Galway.
You probably did it together.
Yeah, do you know what it is? Your face is so familiar. I don't know whether we cross path on a you know, being clean and sober road, or whether we cross path in the madness in Galway City.
Yeah, you probably owe him 20 quid, Danny.
I'm off, lads. I'll see you later.
Make another one.
but you know, like, just even there recently, like, of a friend and his nephew, like 21 years of age, killed himself because of a drug debt, you know. And to hear you saying, like, you come to after a botched suicide attempt in a psychiatric unit, you know what I mean? And I've been there. I haven't been there, but I've been there, man, where it's just like, just the hopelessness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, when you look at your life, you look at all these situations, and you go to yourself, I cannot repair any of this. That's where your head is at. Yeah. And like, and we're a testament, like, you know what I mean, that you can. Like, you know what I mean, no matter where you're at in your head, you know what I mean, and especially for, like, you know, when you have that hopelessness inside yourself, and you just feel like there's no way out. There is. It's tough. It's a tough road, but it isn't as tough as that life, you know. Yeah. And but it's just inspirational to hear you say, to come from that point and to end up where you are. And especially in this day and age, where it just seems like it is, you know, it's a tough gig for kids nowadays. You know what I mean? It really is, like, you know.
Yeah, I've done a bit of work with Jigsaw, you know, the mental health charity, and like, yeah, I mean, I don't envy like kids nowadays, like, with, you know, obviously the internet and stuff like that, and phones and everything, you know. It's just like, you know, it just adds another element to it, like, you know. It's just things are a bit simpler for us. Like, when we were a bit younger.
It's different, isn't it? It is like, when I haven't been involved in taking drugs or anything for 13 years now. Like, coming up to 13 years, and like the difference in everything. In every aspect of that, even the level of violence that's involved in it, like with owing money, and there's so many different things, like you said, phones and computers. Like, people can order shit to their front door and stuff. Like, it's crazy, man. And then when I have family still involved and stuff like that as well, like, and I talk to them, when I chat to them sometimes, just even talking, I think I would not be able for that now. It's madness. It is absolute fucking insanity, and it's mad how you could become comfortable in that madness, and that just was normal, like, without even noticing.
I mean, the other flip side to that as well, I was thinking about it earlier, is that, like, there's so many outlets now for staying clean sober. Like, I mean, like, just looking at your podcast, for example, like, you know what I mean. It's there for people to discover, you know what I mean? And, like, that's the thing, like, I suppose that, attraction rather than promotion thing, and I just think, like, look, it is harder. There's elements that are harder, but, like, I think there's so many outlets nowadays, like, with people.
There's so much help.
Yeah, there's so much help, and there's so much inspiration to be taken from stuff, and there's so many other things going on outside of the pub, than there used to be, like, with sort of outdoor sports and whatever there is going on.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. There's a massive shift in that. Like, you notice when you go to the gym, like, and there's 16-year-olds in it and stuff, like, I mean, like, there's young people doing all that stuff. Like, we hadn't got that. Well, I didn't in Carlo anyway. That's for sure. Right. Like, you know what I mean? We didn't have those kind of options until you got a little bit older. But just on what you said there about the difference in things. I remember going to the doctor when I had a bad drug problem when I was 20 years old, and he told me, no disrespect to the doctor, because he hadn't a clue what he was talking about really back in the. He told me to tell them in the mental hospital that I was suicidal and they will take me in.
Yeah.
To get off drugs. That was what he told me to do.
Yeah.
In the psychiatric unit, like, in the lockdown with people with serious mental illnesses, he told me to go there and tell them that I was suicidal and they'll take me in, like, to
get in straight away.
Try get off stuff, like, you know what I mean? That is fuck. When you think about that, like, compared to now, if you went to a doctor, they have so many different things that are ways to point you in the direction of, there is, like, it is getting better in Ireland for that kind of thing. There's lots of support, I suppose, nowadays.
But I suppose the important thing is to actually go to someone, that a lot of people just don't, and just to take that step. But listen, it's easy to say, and just, it is difficult. You know what I mean? Well, it was for me anyway. You know what I mean? To actually be able to turn around to someone and say, listen, I need some help.
Yeah.
But that just to do it, even as to a GP nowadays, people are a lot more well informed. But on the internet, all the avenues you can go to actually look for help.
Yeah.
And and say, like Jigsaw, like you were saying, Gavan, that you're involved in, like, it's a fantastic thing, the youth mental health service, isn't it? And but I just think it's great that we can be here chatting after that experience, and just to see how much more life was there, how much more life was there to live.
Well, I mean, I think I feel fortunate, like, that I don't have, like, even though I was in the psychiatric and that, I don't have psychiatric issues. Like, I don't have any of that stuff. Like, for me, things are pretty simple in that I, was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I needed to abstain, that was sort of the answer for me in that regard. And then most things kind of took care of themselves after that, so, like, I don't envy, people with kind of, I suppose, stuff on top of that, so, but I think the lines can be a bit blurred nowadays, I can definitely feel, I can have off days, and I can have days where, I'm not firing on all cylinders, like, but, like, I won't say that I'm depressed or that I have anxiety, like, I'm very careful about, like, how I treat myself, and I definitely don't, I just think they're quite overused terms nowadays, and, like, I think people are really sort of, like, playing into them a lot, like, and I think a lot of the stuff the work that Jigsaw does with a lot of young people is really about, like, normalizing, normalizing like, you know, simple stuff like feeling down, you know what I mean? And, you know, it's not that you're depressed and you have depression and that, like, you know, the world's caving in. It's like that you have a bad day, and like sometimes that's just the way it is, you know. And I suppose for me that's really important, like that, you know, like I've done a lot of stuff around like motivational speaking and stuff like that, and like I don't do that anymore. And one of the reasons why I kind of don't do it is because like that whole space kind of annoys me, because it's a lot of like everyone's just like forcing positivity down your neck, and like I'm not, like I am a positive person, but I'm also a negative person. I'm also like, you know, a cynic and somebody who like, you know, looks at like, you know, the darker side of things as well, you know. And like I'm, you know, quick to, you know, realize that like, yeah, like I sometimes have like shit days where I don't get a lot done and I feel bad about myself, and that's fine, you know. I don't like try and like force myself to be this happy clappy positive person 24/7, you know what I mean? That's not what life is about, you know. Life is about ups and downs, you know, and it's just a roller coaster, you know. And whether you're feeling good, like or whether you're feeling the bad, like it's gonna pass, you know what I mean? Like that's just the reality.
I like what you're saying there as well, and I think you kind of touched on it at the start of the podcast about kind of embracing the shadows, because I think that no matter who you are, you have a shadow side, or a side that's, you know, you've well, for me anyways, I have a darker side to me. Like I've good and bad inside me, you know what I mean? And if I kind of go through life thinking I've only got a good side, the bad side will show up without me acknowledging it. And whereas I acknowledge it and embrace it, it can be like an important tool in my life as well. It can be used for a good way, you know what I mean? Because all the negative things in my life have given me benefits too, you know what I mean? Have changed me spiritually, mentally, physically, you know what I mean? And I like the way, you know what I mean? For example, you in your role, you used, let's say, the darker side of you in a positive way, if that makes sense, without, you know, you embraced your darkness to do something that meant a lot to you, if that makes sense. And I think that if you don't do that, that darkness comes out in a way that you can't control. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Like absolutely. So I remember this when I was in I did this thing across Siberia. I walked across this lake in Siberia, Lake Baikal, and like I was there for like 17 days dragging the sled across this frozen lake, and it was absolutely mental. But anyways, I was in the tent one morning, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, my alarm went off, and like what happens in the tent at nighttime is it freezes over, like, so basically like when you breathe out, like you're in minus 30, minus 40, like your breath, like with the moisture in it, will freeze. Like, so you wake up in the morning and like you'll have like a frosty sleeping bag, and the inside of the tent will be all ice. And I remember waking up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, like absolutely aching, just lying there, like looking at this like little ice cocoon that I was in, just thinking to myself, what am I doing out here? And you know, just kind of like trying to motivate myself to get up out of the thing. And I remember this quote from this lady from Galway who's been sober for like I don't know, like 40, 45 years or something, and she was around when I first got sober, and she said to me, at your weakest you're strongest. And like it was another one of these things that like took like somebody said something to me, it takes like a while for it to sink in, but it took like a few years. But like, yeah, like it was that thing of like you know, like, so that moment when I came out of rehab and I'm like sitting in, you know, feeling like absolute shit, like in the psychiatric unit, like at your weakest you're strongest. At that moment you're strongest. Like how does that actually fucking make sense? But it actually does, like, because it's like this paradox of life that like for you to go to those really dark places, for you to go to like that weakness, like that takes strength, like, you know what I mean, for you to actually be in it, you know what I mean? Like there's actually strength to be taken from that, you know. So again, like it just comes back to that perspective. Like, so like I always carry that sort of stuff with me, where I'm like, I always try and flip it on its head, you know. So like, you know, to not be afraid of like going to that dark place, to not be afraid of being weak, like to be vulnerable, you know what I mean, to be like, you know, alone, to get hurt, like, you know, by being in love, like all this sort of stuff is you know, sort of testament to that sort of saying, you know what I mean?
Cool. And Gavin, we've decided we have a question that we asked our guests early on in the podcast, and it kind of faded away. But I think it was because it's kind of a tough question for them to answer. But with, like, you know, taking into consideration the name of the podcast, we're wondering, what do you do for crack?
No, just to clarify, the crack is like fun in Ireland as well, right? Crack, man.
Crack, yeah.
We have a dictionary underneath the description just to explain the Irish colloquialisms, like whatever. But
yeah,
outside of like rowing 3,000 miles and all that.
Well, I live in the Alps, like, so I'm in Chamonix now. So I've been living over here since last year.
Wow. And, is that where you are now?
Yeah.
It looks like the roof there was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's like kind of wooden kind of.
I was thinking that was pretty fancy for Galway.
Yeah. You wouldn't get away with building something like this in Galway.
No.
Yeah, so I live in here in the Alps, and like Chamonix Mont Blanc is extreme sports death capital of the world.
Wow.
So yeah, you can definitely have the crack here. Yeah, I don't know. Like for me, I just like, you know, obviously the expeditions and the row and all that sort of stuff. Like, obviously that's a long time to be out in the wilderness. Like, but like I only do that stuff. You know, it's not like I'm doing it every other week. You know. You know, I might do one expedition a year, you know, or one big thing a year. So the rest of the time, you know, I'm either working or I'm back here, you know. So, you know, for me, I'm just paragliding here. I'm running around the mountains. I'm snowboarding. You know, that's all obviously a lot of fun. So
absolutely,
that's
what I do.
I like the word just.
Yeah, just
running around. Just an average day.
It's just before we wrap up as well. I had a question that I really wanted to ask. Do you sleep well?
Yes, I do actually. Yeah.
How many hours do you sleep every night when you're not working on this stuff?
Try and get 8 hours. Yeah.
And what's your process in going to bed at night? Because this is fascinating. Because I struggle. I'm not good at it. So
I'm, you know, despite like, you know, trying to kill myself doing expeditions, like I'm very, very like into looking after myself. You know, like you know, physically, you know, through diet, like, you know, meditation, you know, sort of stuff like that. Like do a bit of yoga, all that sort of. And like sleep to me is like super important. Like, you know, there's no bloody drug or food or exercise you can do like that will, you know, be as good as getting a full night's sleep. So
what's a full night's sleep for you? Sorry,
for me is 8 hours is the goal, like always the goal.
Okay.
So I I just try and get off the phone, even though I still have it in the room because I usually listen to podcasts, like so I'll probably put on like a podcast or an audiobook and
fall asleep to it, is it?
Yeah, I usually fall asleep to it. Yeah, it's a nightmare when you're trying to listen to audiobooks because you're coming back to, you know. But yeah, generally, like I need to be physically tired, you know. But the other problem is that, like, if I'm overtrained, I have a line that if I cross, I won't be able to get to sleep, and that's because there's too much cortisol flowing through my system. So, like when I do all these endurance events, people say to me like, "Oh, well, how do you like, do you not need like more sleep?" And like, I actually absolutely hate sleeping and I never have to set an alarm. Like if I go for a sleep, like, you know, during one of these ultras or something, like I'll only sleep for like an hour and I'll wake up and my body will be like, right, let's go. You know what I mean? Because I'm kind of in this heightened alert state. So for me, like I need to create like a restful like state. And if I'm, as I said, if I'm anyway overtrained, like I won't be sleeping well and I'll be waking up early. So I had it there a few days ago. Like I knew I would know, and I pushed through that before, and I ended up getting injured. Whereas a few days ago, I knew I was a little bit like I trained hard last week, and I woke up at like 4:30, and I just knew that was a sign. And I took an extra day off the day after, and I got my sleep back to normal. So, like it's hard. Like everybody's different, like, you know. But I'm constantly learning like around that sort of stuff, you know. But as I said, I'm always trying to, try and get 7-8 hours, you know.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, listen, I think that's a wrap, Gavin. I really appreciate your time. It was really cool chatting to you. And if you're ever doing anything down the road, another one of your amazing adventures, and you're maybe looking to get the word out there, please give us a shout. I'd love to have you back on again.
Yeah, definitely. No, seriously, thanks for having me. It's great to get stuck in and talk about all this sort of stuff. Haven't done one of these in a while, you know.
And if you're ever looking for a training partner for an ultramarathon, Danny is kind of keen to get going again.
I was waiting.
Thanks, Colin.
That's
Before after that one marathon, I wasn't doing another one. And that was just a fucking marathon.
There's
actually good ultramarathons in Tenerife. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done a lot of running up in Tady, up in Tenerife, in the mountain in Low too.
Oh yeah.
And done pad training, like MMA stuff up in the mountain.
Yeah. Okay,
very
good. Yeah.
Like just even like when you say that, like I've been in a cage with my head rammed against the corner of the cage and someone pounding my head, and I swore that wasn't as bad as the last 7K of the marathon. I was like,
I wouldn't like that now. You can have that. You can have all that. Like I'd rather bait myself into the ground.
It's kind of weird because I'd be like, Danny, I prefer to get kicked in the head than actually do a round of golf.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't like getting kicked in the head, but I prefer to do that sport where that happens rather than actually.
Are you saying that you'll do an ultramarathon if I get in the cage?
Oh, I don't think I'd be able to.
Lay down the challenge.
What date is it?
Colin, you're roped in there, brother.
What kind of dates have you got there available? Just check to see if I'm
check my diary.
Just check to see, because I probably won't be at the minute.
Yeah, it's like
2023, 24. I'm in. Yeah, 100%.
Ultramarathon, like what? Like I know you did 500k, but what is that? What an ultramarathon is?
No, that's like an it's over a marathon.
Ultramarathon is 120 to 200, is it?
Well, it's actually technically anything over a marathon. So a 30 miler is like class as an ultra.
Okay, I'm in. I'll do that one with you.
I'm in with you as well. You're in the cage next week with us, yeah.
Is it? I'm down for the 30-mile thing. I can do 20k. I've never pushed past 20, but I'm down for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
in the Arctic.
Yeah.
I know you're showing extra bits in there now. You're going a step too far, like.
And like ultramarathons in the Arctic, are you allowed like those snowmobiles, right? Or is that considered cheating?
I'd ride one of them beside you.
Or a team of dogs and a sled. Yeah. Pretty cool, man. I'm down for that, Anyway, listen, it's been a pleasure, man. I really enjoyed this. I would stay talking to you forever. And it's been great. Hopefully we get to chat again for sure.
All right, lads. Thanks for having me on anyway.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.
On the West.
Don't forget to subscribe to That's Good Crack on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever you're listening to it right now.